hello everyone. My name is Alvis Diaz Scorpion and I will going to report the determinants of the morality of human act and the modifiers of the human act. So when we say the determinants of the morality of human act, this will help us to determine whether something is moral or immoral. So there are three parts of the determinants of the morality of human act, namely the act itself, the motive of the agent, and the circumstances. So we have first the act itself. It refers to the deed done or performed. It is technically called the object or nature of the act. It is the primary determinant of the morality. So this act itself is also known as the object, which is the thing that is actually being done. So for instance, I am going to steal a dress from my sister, so the object of that is the stealing of the dress. In identifying the act itself or the object is just simply what you have chosen to do. Another example is that you work as a janitor in your school because you want to get into your college. So the act itself or the object in that scenario is working at your school. We have the three parts of the act itself, namely the intrinsic morality, the intrinsically good act, and the intrinsically evil act. So intrinsic morality, it pertains to the fact that there is an act which is in itself capable or not of being ordered to the dictates of right reason, human nature, and God's eternal law. The intrinsically good act, it is an act whose goodness proceeds from its very nature, which is the capable of being ordered to the good and to the ultimate and which is God, apart from two other determinants of morality. And also we have the intrinsically evil act. It is an act whose evil proceeds from its very nature, incapable of being ordered to the nature of the human person and the God. So when we say intrinsically good, it is such as helping others and telling the truth. And there are the acts that is the intrinsically evil, such as harming others and telling lies. The second one is the motive of agent, which is refers to the end, the purpose, or goal to be achieved by means of the act. It is done in short, it is the intention of the agent in performing the act. So it is also known as the intention or means the whys. Why are you performing this act? What is your motivation or why are you doing it? So for example that I gave about the stealing my sister's dress. Let's say I'm stealing my sister's dress because I have a date and she didn't let me borrow it. So the reason why I'm stealing my sister's dress is that I have a date and I'm trying to impress someone that I am dating. So we have the last one, the circumstances, which refer to the conditions in which the act is done, affecting its morality in the way or other. They exist outside of the nature of the act and are not of the essence of the act. So this means that and these circumstances means the component looks at the responsibility like how responsible would we hold someone for their actions. So these are the circumstances you have to look. We have the circumstance of the person, the circumstance of the quantity or the quality of the act, the circumstance of place, the circumstance of means or the instrument, and the circumstance of the manner. When we say the circumstance of the person, it refers to the agent performing the act or the person to whom the act is done. It means the who, like who is the agent or to whom the act is done. The second one is the circumstance of quantity or the quality of the act. It refers to what is the extent of the act or was the injury slight or serious, like was the amount stolen large or small. The third one is the circumstance of the place, which means refers to the venue or where the act is performed. The fourth one is the circumstance of means or the instrument, refers to which is used and employed in the performance of an act. It is deemed associated with the act in its performance, like what instrument used by doing that act. We have the circumstance of manner. It refers to the condition in which the act is done or how it is performed by the agent. So this means that how How did the agent perform the act? Was he in good or bad faith? Was his evil disposition intensely malicious or only slightly? So, let's proceed to the modifiers of the human acts. So, when we say modifiers of the human act, the main point of talking about this is that how the modifiers lessens moral accountability. What is the modifiers of human act? So we have five modifiers, namely the ignorance, the concupiscence, the fear, the violence, and the habits. So we have first the ignorance. It is the absence of intellectual knowledge. We distinguish between the vincible and the invincible ignorance. Ignorance is the absence of necessary knowledge, which means that a person in a given situation who is performing the certain act ought to have. So the ignorance is a negative thing, for it is a negation of knowledge. In short, this is the mere absence of the knowledge. We have first the vincible ignorance. So this means that it cannot be distilled or overcome by the due amount of the diligence. This is the ignorance that can be dismissed by the use of ordinary diligence. This results due to the lack of proper diligence on the agent and his fault. This is also called the culpable ignorance. We have the second ignorance, namely the invincible ignorance that cannot be overcome by any amount of diligence or effort because under the circumstances it is impossible for one to know. So this ignorance that ordinary and proper diligence cannot dispel because the agent has no realization whatever of his lack of knowledge. And also the agent who realizes his ignorance find ineffective his effort to dismiss it. So these are the principles of the ignorance. For the invincible ignorance, it excuses and relieves the agents of responsibility acts done in invincible ignorance are therefore not voluntary and the agent is not held responsible for them. So the example is that a Negrito who had been living all his life in the mountains and who happened to come for Manila for the first time and violated traffic laws could not be held responsible for violating the law. The second one is the vincible ignorance, which means does not destroy or remove voluntariness nor responsibility. Acts done in vincible ignorance are still voluntary and the agent is still responsible for them. So, for example, a Manila resident who violated traffic laws, not knowing of such laws before, would still be responsible for his actions because his ignorance is invincible. So, the second one is the concupiscence, which means the passions, or the technically called the concupiscence. After the voluntariness of an action, for a man, acting under the influence of a passion would not be acting perfectly of his own free volition. A man in a fit of anger, for instance, is liable to do acts which otherwise he would not do in his right sense. So we have the it distinguish between the antecedent and consequent concupiscence. The former is the type of concupiscence which occurs in us spontaneously without stimulating it. The latter one arises at the command or continues with the consent of the will. The first impulse is not free and consequently not imputable to us. In as far as concupiscence impels the will, it retains our liberty and thus lessens our responsibility. So we have the principles. The antecedent concupiscence lessens but does not remove voluntariness and responsibility. Consequent concupiscence neither lessens nor destroys responsibility. So antecedent concupiscence disturbs the mind and hinders the calm judgment of the mind upon the moral qualities of an act, thus impairing knowledge needed for perfect voluntariness. It is a strong and sudden urge to action and thus it lessens the full and prompt control that will must exercise perfectly. Hence, it impairs freedom. Since knowledge and freedom are impaired by it, the voluntariness of an act is thereby lessened, and its consequences diminish the responsibility of the agent. So the third one is the fear. Fear is an agitation of the mind brought about by the apprehension of an impending evil. So it is the shrinking back of the mind from danger. It is the anxiety of worry or mind, from the sight disturbance to actual panic, brought about by the apprehension of imminent or coming will. We have the principles of the fear. When we act because of fear, our will is dragged along, so to say, and so its freedom is restricted and our responsibility is diminished correspondingly. Great fear sometimes exempts a person from acts enjoined by a positive law. We have the fear diminishes the voluntary nature of an act. So the principle of the fear is that fear does not excuses an evil act which springs from it. The law of church and state provides that an act done from grave fear, unjustly suffered, and excited directly in order to force the agent to do the act that is against his will. It is an invalid act or one that may be invalidated. So the fourth one is the violence. It is an external force extorted by a free cause to coerce the other into doing that which is contrary to his will. The free cause refers to the person who has the free will to inflict the said force upon his victim. So when we say violence, it is the purpose of compelling a person to perform an act which is against his will. For example, forcing someone to tell a lie at gunpoint. We have the principles of the violence. The acts elicited by the will are not subject to violence. External acts caused by the violence to which due resistance is offered are in no wise imputable to the agent or the victim. The second one is that which is done under the influence of imperfect violence is less voluntary, and so the moral responsibility is lessened but not taken away completely. So these acts elicited by the will are not subject to violence. We have the habits. The habits are the inclination to perform some particular action acquired by repetition and characterized by a decreased power of resistance and an increased facility of performance, sometimes called the second nature, something deeply embedded in an individual but ingrained by being inborn, repeated actions performed by the agent. So habit refers to the operative habit, which is lasting readiness and facility born of frequently repeated acts for acting in a certain manner. For example, the habit of smoking. We have the principle that acts done by force of habit are still voluntary, at least in cause. As long as the habit, there is still voluntariness on the part of the doer, and he is responsible for the same if he willfully develop the habit and makes no effort to overcome the same. Whatever therefore flows or follows from the habit which the doer initially entertained and allowed to become a part of him is still voluntary on the part of the doer. The habit does not destroy voluntariness. Acts from habit are always voluntary, at least in cause, or as long as the habit is allowed to endure. So that's all for our report. Okay na yun, Rani?
Okay na na oy, di gyapon na nila tiwas-an oy kay magtan-aw na sila.
Bakit ako tutulan do?
Di gyapon. Uy, uni buhi pa kani. Natulog gani si uni do. Ta-stop na nimo ara.
Ay, wala pa.
Wala
Wait.
uy, naro ko dito.